At the age of 35, after a 1.5 year long layoff, with pillow hands, without a submission, Jack Hermansson beat Joe Pyfer everywhere. And he has the last laugh. The Joker is back. Joe Pyfer just received a big fat fraud check in the mail. Holy crap. And before we do talk about that salty man, Joe Pyfer, we have to give Hermansson credit. This was not just a fraud check. This was one of the craftiest performances I've ever seen. It had everything you could possibly ask for when it comes to the famous crafty vet beats the up-and-coming, hyped-up prospect. Jack Hermansson struggled early. He was down 2 rounds to none. Joe Pyfer was winging big bombs on him, getting close. Yeah, he had taken a couple of shots, but you're going to need a couple more to knock out the Joker. And Hermansson just eased into it, kept composed. Next thing you know, he starts doing better in that second round. He starts getting in Joe Pyfer's face, letting him know, listen, I'm going to be here for a while. It ain't going to be that easy to knock me out. Next thing you know, Jack Hermansson starts going upstairs with a jab. Has a very close second round, takes all the momentum back. And from the third on, it was just total domination for Jack Hermansson everywhere in this fight. In the clinch, when Joe Pyfer would go in for a takedown, Hermansson would stuff it. He'd land a good knee to the body and an elbow behind it. On the feet, pillow hands Hermansson is walking down Joe Pyfer, not on his bike like he was against Chris Curtis, walking down the guy that broke Francis Ngannou's punch record, even though he doesn't hit harder than Francis, that's for sure at this point. I don't give a fuck what the machine says. But still, walking down a guy that's saturated with salt, that's just ready to unleash fury. Jack Hermansson putting the jab on his nose. At one point, Joe Pyfer got his nose busted up so hard with one of those jabs, he turned to the ref and asked for a little bit of relief, getting out of the way of shots. His boxing defense was on point. His cardio was on point. And he didn't even need takedowns to win this fight. Yet, to close it all off, he did end up getting one in the 5th round. Despite winning the round, he got the takedown to seal the deal, got a couple minutes of control time, landed some good little short pillow punches on the ground, and then at the end, 10 seconds to go, we saw Jack Hermansson letting go that Joker laugh, and Joe Pyfer doesn't even know what hit him. I think that this guy took a lot of lessons away from that fight with Sean Strickland, and at 35, this is the best Jack Hermansson's ever been, all right? His boxing, it looks so damn good, and he does have long arms, but we rarely see him utilize the jab as well as he did tonight. And, I mean, this is just something that goes to show that Jack Hermansson, despite not having a lot of power in his hands, is one of the best skilled middleweights out there. He's got great cardio. He was able to stay composed. His defense looks better than ever. Yes, Joe Pyfer was landing early, but I think that Pyfer just doesn't have that deep of a tool bag. He's got a really good right hand. He's got a good lead hook, decent jab, but that's kind of it. And Hermansson made those reads. He was able to allow Joe Pyfer to swing himself out. And Pyfer, I think, thought he was just going to walk through the Joker. This is an old man. Can't finish a fly. He's not taking me down. I got brick wall takedown defense. Thought shit was sweet. Next thing you know, Hermansson's on top of you, smashing, cracking, and snapping twigs. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall at the Dan Hardy household watching this, and I don't even think they would have been surprised. They probably predicted this to happen. A crafty performance from Hermansson. His takedown defense looked insane too. I know he's not a main training partner of Khamzat Chimaev, but he seems to have improved there as well. I mean, this guy's wrestling looked incredible. His boxing defense, his jab, the clinch game, at every step of the way, he sunned Joe Pyfer in the later half of the fight. And for Joe Pyfer, the UFC marketing him, this has got to sting, because the UFC was kind of drawing him up as their next poster boy. Be like Joe Pyfer. Dana's been, breaking out the red panties, drawing up the Lamborghini, calling the freaking, I don't even know what you call it. Who's the driver? The chauffeur. He's been driving around. Joe Pyfer's been whipping around with a chauffeur recently. He's thinking that he's that guy, and he is. He is that guy. He's that Joe Pyfer salty man. But at the same time, you can't sleep on the Joker. And the Joker just proved this all wrong. He literally had the last laugh. He had the fucking cards the whole time. Again, Hermansson, crafty performance, dude. Firing on all cylinders. Losing the first 2 rounds, coming back. This is going to go down in the all-time book. Okay? I'm joking, but still. I'm happy. I don't even care if I got my pick wrong tonight. Because I get to see a meme brought to life. Because, you know, I was a fan of Hermansson, but I was kind of poking fun at him a little bit. I was saying he's skilled. He was skilled. But to see him actually pull it off, walk down Joe Pyfer, like get in his face, menacingly gritting his teeth down, just fire off jabs left and right, fuck him up in the clinch. So even though this was a fraud check for Pyfer, I still think that a lot of this is Hermansson just improving a whole lot. Incredible for performance from Hermansson. He called out Nasruddin Imavov, and I'd love to see that fight. Amazing fight to make. Another fight that I wouldn't mind is Hermansson versus the loser of Robert Whittaker and Paulo Costa, especially if it's Whittaker. If Whittaker loses to Costa and it's clear that he's starting to slip, but we know he still has some skills, you know, then I think that'd be a really good fight to make. For Pyfer, on the other hand, I think that we should give him someone like Gregory Rodriguez, and I'll talk about Gregory Rodriguez's performance earlier tonight, but even though Rodriguez is dangerous, he's not as crafty, and he doesn't move his head as much. His head is always right there to be hit, doesn't have the best chin, it's a little bit suspicious. Pyfer's hard to take down. I mean, that would be a banger fight. Or we could see him fight Jung Young Park, the Iron Turtle. Either one of those matchups would be great for Joe Pyfer. And yeah, I mean, the UFC is probably not loving this outcome. Jack Hermansson was a massive underdog. They were not marketing him in the build-up to this. Of course, they were showing his highlights second to Joe Pyfer, but they were really painting out Joe Pyfer to be that guy. If Pyfer were to have won tonight, he may have been on the verge of a number one contenders fight. And he's going to have to go back to Philly and go back to the drawing board. I don't know what he does from here, man, because, of course, he's still young. He's 28. He is going to get better. He's not going to give up, right? He's going to be able to improve. I guess just experience, man. Experience, because if this was a 3-rounder, he probably would have won, even though people would be crying robbery. Because I could imagine they would if Hermansson made it a close second round, maybe doesn't win, but then dominates the third, especially with the way Pyfer's been rubbing people the wrong way. Even though, listen, I've poked fun at him before, calling him salty, but I'm a fan of Pyfer. I actually think he's entertaining. I like the guy's attitude. Even though I said he's bitter sometimes, still a good attitude to have in the fighting game. At the same time, though, you know, people would have called that a robbery, even if he would have legitimately won. But it's a 5-rounder, and you're in there with a grizzled craftsman like Jack Hermansson, who has been honing that craft. He's always had the skills, but he's even better now. I know this may sound crazy, but I actually think Hermansson would have some competitive fights in the top 10. A guy like Cannonier, a rematch? I don't think so, because again, Cannonier can make those adjustments. He does have a deeper tool bag. He's got great cardio too. He has the experience. But Paulo Costa, Marvin Vettori, I think Hermansson beats Marvin Vettori in a rematch. I really do. Even though he did get beaten, Vettori took that fight on short notice. The way that Hermansson's looking today, that defense, that jab, you don't need all the power in the world to stick and move on Marvin Vettori, who's there to be hit. That clinch striking as well, I honestly wouldn't mind seeing that fight. Maybe Hermansson versus Brendan Allen would be a good fight. That could be a good one. The winner of that, Allen versus Vettori. Either way, I'm actually really hyped to see this guy's next fight, and we got to give him props. 35, year-and-a-half layoff, being doubted, who the fuck was picking him, gets it done, proves me wrong. I'm happy to be proven wrong. And it's not based on just kicking and running on his bike like he was against Chris Curtis. Even though that was a good performance, he got in Pyfer's face. Like, he fucking took the fight to him. He was beating him up in the clinch, stuffing the takedowns. He was sunning him. Good win for Pyfer. Oh, I'm sorry. He would have liked that, but good win for Hermansson. Amazing main event. I just love these crafty vet performances because I like seeing these guys that get counted out or people that face adversity, because in the first round, I think I was saying, dude, Hermansson has no chance getting the shit beat out of him. He's just surviving. In the beginning of the second, I was saying, Hermansson's not doing bad, but at the same time, he's just there. Like, what's he really doing well? Then he starts finding his groove. Third, fourth, he's dominating. So, Pyfer, he's not liking this one. But he looked a little bit humble in defeat, which is fine. You know what? I'm not even going to act like this guy needed to be humbled, to be honest. Right? Ilya Topuria, I want to see him get humbled. Pyfer's just a bit of a hothead. So, no reason to put the man down. No reason to put the man down. I'm still a fan of Joe Pyfer, and he still has a future in this sport. Let's get on to the rest of the card. Dan Ige busted up Andre Fili, knocked him out in the first round. An Ige fight can go one or two ways. It can be a slow Dan Ige, mediocre shitfest. No disrespect. Listen, Dan Ige's had some boring ones, even with high-level opponents. Maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh, but outside of the Nate Landwehr fight, he's not been in too many scraps. He's got a very conservative, if you don't get the big KO, it's not going to be something to write home about type of style. But he gets the big KO over Fili, establishing himself once again as one of the elite fighters. Andre Fili just hasn't been able to get past the Dan Iges of the world, and Ige has always been able to get past the Andre Filis of the world. And then we had Bryczek and Petrosyan. Honestly, great for Petrosyan. I got this fight wrong. I did pick Bryczek. You know, some of these Polish guys that come from KSW, I don't even know if he was fighting in KSW, but I could swear, rewatching a couple of his fights, he had the advertisement tattoos on him, and I just always relate that to KSW. A lot of these Polish guys, they come into the UFC, and although they don't have flashy skill sets, the basics get by at the highest level. And I was thinking, you know, we could see like a Jan Blachowicz type of performance here, just sticking behind the basics, not flashy, still making it work. We could see a Mateusz Gamrot type of performance. Usually these guys that come out of Poland are very high level. But Petrosyan, after the first round, which I think Bryczek won with his boxing, Petrosyan just starts to get into a flow state. Not that entertaining, but he just stayed at range and kind of picked him apart with a little bit of a measly jab. Hurt him on a couple of occasions. I think he got a takedown on the third. But good for Petrosyan because he was fighting for his UFC contract, really. If he lost this one, his only win in the UFC would have been against Shogun, and he would have had 4 L's, 3 of them being finishes. Great performance. Very underwhelming, nonetheless. And Bryczek, just a very disappointing UFC debut. Brad Tavares and Gregory Rodriguez. Outside of the Jack Hermansson performance, this was the second most impressive, in my opinion. And I'm saying that because not only did Rodriguez finish Brad Tavares, and Brad Tavares is definitely a tough guy to put away. He's the definition of a tough out, right? Tavares doesn't have any elite wins, but he's always a tough out. Rodriguez didn't want to deal with none of that. He wanted to finish him, bro. And he got it done. You have to push hard for a finish over Brad Tavares. And not only was that impressive, because he really did impose his will like a madman in the third, gunning for that finish, but he took this man down on a few occasions. And I said in the build-up to this, it's going to be really hard for him to take down Tavares. As you guys know, he has some of the best takedown defense in the UFC. If Rodriguez can take down Tavares, I expect him to have a great chance to take down just about anyone else in the middleweight division. The only other guys to really take down Tavares have been Omari Akhmedov and Yoel Romero back in the day. But back in the day, I don't think Brad Tavares' takedown defense was as good as it is now. Rodriguez got past the takedown defense, took him down on a couple of occasions, and then knocked him out in the third. Great performance, and I'd like to see him fight Joe Pyfer. Don't be so confident in his chances to beat Joe Pyfer just because Pyfer got fraud checked. Rodriguez doesn't move his head a whole lot, and Tavares is just not as dangerous as a striker. But every time I see Rodriguez get cracked, nonetheless, he does a little bit of a jitterbug dance. You know, I mean, he got knocked out by Bruno Ferreira, bounced back with a good win over Tululin. But every time I see him get hit, I worry because he does not react well to it. So great win for him. Maybe him and Pyfer's next. On to the next one. Michael Johnson gets a good performance, good victory over Darrius Flowers. Another crafty win. I did get this one wrong, but I guess the good Michael Johnson with some good hand speed and good defense showed up, got the takedown, and stunk it up in the third. Very crafty, just avoiding that last round KO chance for the guy that's not as good. Great win for Michael Johnson. I think his record is 20-19 now. I don't actually know his record by heart, but it's not the prettiest record. But either way, Darrius Flowers was looking for that one big shot, looking for that overhand, the same one that Emmett and Diego Ferreira hit him with. Couldn't land it. Got close on a couple of occasions, but just got outpointed Michael Johnson's jab looked great. His body shots looked great. And, of course, he utilized that wrestling in the third to stink it up. Boring fight. There were a couple of boring ones on this card. We also had Rodolfo Vieira submitting Armen Petrosyan in the first round. I got this one wrong. I don't know if I've said it yet, but I went 6-6 on this card. Not so great, but really good win for Rodolfo Vieira. I cannot believe this guy is only 34. And I know that doesn't seem so crazy because Gregory Rodriguez is 31 and he looks 50. But my goodness, Vieira looks like he's 45. The sauce will age you, I'll tell you that. But really good victory. I'm not even coping right now. That's what happens if you get taken down in the first round when you're dry and you're facing an elite level grappler, especially a jiu-jitsu guy that competed at the highest level. First round finish. Vieira's always dangerous early. I thought Petrosyan was going to be able to piece him up and keep this standing, and Vieira didn't necessarily have the best wrestling, but he took down Petrosyan with ease. Great performance from Vieira, submitting Armen with an arm triangle. And let's get on to the next one. Carlos Prates and Trevin Giles. I'm going to be honest, guys. Even though Prates did get the big KO and I picked him to win, he is not Anderson Silva 2.0, okay? Maybe this is what it would look like to see Anderson Silva fight modern guys, but I'm joking. He kind of had a disappointing performance. Like, he was getting beat up on the feet. He was getting rocked. He was doing the jitterbug in the first round. This was actually a really good-looking performance for Trevin Giles until it wasn't, obviously. But Prates, outside of that perfectly placed left hand to the chin of Trevin Giles, who put him to sleep, and Giles is not the easiest guy to put away. This is only the second time we've seen him get KO'd. So he's hard to put away. Credit to Carlos Prates, but at the same time, Prates was getting outstruck. Like, he was getting pieced up in the boxing. He did land a beautiful shot, sharpshooter, sniper, like Silva, but he was getting beat. He was looking kind of mediocre compared to the hype, I'm not going to lie. And he's 31. He's not a spring chicken when it comes to striking. And it's not like Giles was really shooting any takedowns on him. The kicks were all right. He did have some very slick front kicks to the body, lead front kicks to the body. It was great, but outside of the odd body kick and a couple of good knees, he looked a little underwhelming until he got the KO. And I know he still got the KO. Ultimately, that's what matters. He got the win. He was getting beat up by Giles for the first round and a half until he found that KO shot. Either way, great UFC debut. Not everyone dominates their first fight in the UFC, right? I mean, we've seen guys have hairy moments in their UFC debut. We've seen Ian Gary get rocked badly in his UFC debut. Still got the first round finish, but we'll see. He's just got his feet wet for the first time under the bright lights in his dream promotion. Of course, he could have just had the octagon jitters, but good win nonetheless. Oki versus Kwamba, a little bit of a boring fight. I understand it was short notice, but Oki just kind of won this fight with jabs. I expected a finish, not going to lie, but it wasn't the opponent that he got ready for. Either way, a little bit boring. Marcin Prachnio, even though he was on the verge of getting finished in the third round, Devin Clark just couldn't find the right shots to put him away. He still won the third. He won the first. And despite him gassing out badly, Marcin Prachnio looked hungry, aggressive. He looked ready and excited to fight tonight, which is a little bit different because usually he looks like he's half asleep when he's fighting. But he really put it on Devin Clark in this one. Just pieced him up, threw a lot of big energy-consuming strikes, like a lot of spinning strikes. And of course, if you have a high output and you add those on, that could lead to you tiring out a little bit. But he did well. The second round was sort of close, but credit to Marcin Prachnio. This is one of his best performances to date outside of the Khalil Roundtree one. Devin Clark, again, both guys weren't so impressive going into this, but Marcin Prachnio, you never know, man. These light heavyweights, sometimes they just level up tenfold out of nowhere. I know it's not the highest level of competition, but even against low levels of competition, Marcin's usually not looking this good. He looked great tonight. Max Griffen, Jeremiah Wells, I got this one wrong. Jeremiah Wells got the shit end of the stick. Some people thought he got robbed. I honestly thought that he won the first round and he won the third. They gave it to Max Griffen because of that measly old control time. It wasn't like it was a total robbery. I don't think it was necessarily a robbery, but I wouldn't have minded the UFC judges giving that to Wells because I feel like he did a little bit more damage in the third. But either way, I'm not going to call it a robbery. Boring as fuck. All right, Max Griffen is incapable of having an entertaining fight outside of his once every 5 year KO moment like he had over Song Kanon. Listen, Max Griffen is not winning over any fans, but good for him. He's getting the job done. He's still winning. He's showing up for a paycheck. Maybe he's not out here to be a fan favorite. Maybe he doesn't mind being, a guy that just is able to win I was going to say a squeaky clean. It was not a squeaky clean performance. He's just out here to get that win money, and that's totally okay, but it's boring as fuck. I'm not going to lie, and I don't love watching him fight. Anthony Smith Jr., the Eastern European Anthony Smith, Bogdan Guskov, with his hands low, knocks out Zach Pauga in the first round with a 4-piece, gnarly shots on the chin. I predicted him to win, and I'm happy I did that because a lot of people were writing him off after his loss to Volkan Ozdemir. And even though Volkan hasn't looked that impressive in recent years, he still is a top 15 caliber light heavyweight. He's pretty big for the weight class. He has a lot of power. He has strong low kicks. He's crafty. He can be crafty compared to these rookies, of course. And, of course, he was fighting Bogdan, who took that fight on short notice at the time. But Zach Pauga, no finishes in his pro career. Maybe he has one. I could be mistaken. He may have one. But you look at this guy's record. Sure, he used to play football. Kind of seems like a powerful guy, but he's just in the wrong division. Like, he should be fighting at middleweight because he was coming down from heavyweight recently. He used to fight at heavyweight. I honestly still think this guy's too small for a light heavyweight and still doesn't have a whole lot of power. And he thought he was just going to beat Bogdan by smushing him into the cage and getting a little bit of a lackluster clinch fest decision. Bogdan is there to take risks, and I'm already a big fan of him. All right? He was taking risks against Volkan Ozdemir. Hands down, still allows him to confuse his opponent, to make them guess what's coming. Is it going to be the uppercut? Is it going to be the overhand? You don't really know. You don't know which angle it's coming from. He's a risk taker. He's a finisher. He has heavy hands. And I think we could see this guy be one of the more fun fighters in the light heavyweight division. Even though I still am not convinced that he's that great. He does have some power. Fernie Garcia, Hyder Emil. Hyder Emil gets it done. Beats Fernie Garcia. They went to war. Excellent fight. Fernie Garcia had a couple of moments where I thought he was going to get the finish. Hyder Emil, a couple of moments where I thought he was going to get the finish. Both guys were rocking each other. Ultimately, Hyder Emil does get the finish. And Fernie Garcia, unfortunately, guys, is probably going to get cut. So this was the end of his career, as sad as that is for every fighter that has a fight like that. And then the first fight of the night, we also had Daniel Marcos, Aryo Kalang, ended in a no contest. If that fight were to have went on, I probably would have got it right. So I would have been 7-6, but I ended up 6-6. I got the Hyder Emil fight right. I got the Bogdan Guskov fight right. The Oki fight, the Prates fight, the Gregory Rodriguez fight, and I also got the Ihor and Fili fight. So not a bad night of fights, all right? Ihor really rejuvenated me and gave me energy after a couple of boring decisions. Bryce second, Pateria was boring as fuck. We had the Griffen and Wells fight. This was kind of a weird one. We'd have a boring fight, then we have an amazing finish, and a shit fight, an amazing finish. And then, of course, the main event was awesome to watch. Jack Hermansson gets it done via being extremely crafty. Joe Pyfer, going to have to go back to the drawing board, reload on some salt, and he'll be back. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Until next time.